Conklin and Company with 13 ABC Action News anchor Lee Conklin. First with what's happening behind the headlines. And Take 3, our panel of political analysts.
Morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Conklin and Company. Today on the program, Live United 2020. That's the mantra for the United Way of Greater Toledo. What that means going forward for our community, the people who live here. We'll talk with the leader of the United Way, Karen Matheson, a little bit later. 13 ABC, really proud to be part of what has become an annual event now. It is the Hope for the Hungry Food Drive. It's the third annual, partnering with the Toledo Northwestern Ohio Food Bank. We'll talk with the president and CEO, James Caldwell, at the food bank a little bit later. But first, protecting one of our natural resources here, the Great Lakes, with the measure co-authored by U.S. Senator from Ohio, Rob Portman. And the Senator, once again, joining us in studio. I think it's been maybe a little over a year since you've been here, Senator. We are so pleased that you're joining us as we tape here on Friday. Got a big weekend coming up.
Yep.
And as this airs Sunday, you will have gone fishing.
Hopefully I'll got a couple walleye.
Absolutely, had some success here. But the reason for this particular visit is you really wanted to talk about this bill regarding algae.
Yep.
That has become algae blooms that have become such an issue for especially our region here, right off of Lake Erie.
Yep.
And you've got a measure waiting for the president. You're waiting for the president to sign it. Mm-hmm. You anticipate he will. Mm-hmm. Tell us why this has been such an important issue to you, and also where you're co-author on this.
Yeah. Well, a couple years ago, I started learning more about these algal blooms, so-called toxic algae, that's not just in Lake Erie, but also in some of our other freshwater lakes in Ohio and reservoirs, and realized that this is a huge cost to the taxpayer. We talked about the city of Salina, but also the city of Columbus has had some issues with their water.
Grand Lake St. Mary's down in Salina.
Grand Lake St. Mary's has been in the news a lot. This is it's dangerous to have kids in the water, pets in the water. It's very harmful, obviously, to our recreational industry here in Ohio. I did go out in Lake Erie last year fishing also, and I went out to be able to see some of the algal blooms, in addition to catching fish, to see what was out there and to talk about the invasive species also. But I'll do that again. I'll be out there with some scientists. We'll have a roundtable discussion afterwards to find out what kind of progress we're making. This legislation is to let the federal government play a bigger role in what's happening in freshwater lakes in Ohio and elsewhere. It's legislation I've worked on for the last couple of years. It provides federal research, which is really important. We need to have the best research to be able to figure out how to solve this problem, because frankly there's a lot of disagreement as to what the real source is, and we need to figure out exactly what the source is to be able to pinpoint it.
There are a myriad of sources.
There are. Yeah, it's it's homes, it's yards with fertilizer, it's golf courses, it's farms, it's sewer plants. A lot of it coming out of Detroit, where a lot of the water comes into Lake Erie. So we need to really pinpoint that. And then second, it monitors. The federal government has the ability through NOAA and other resources to be able to monitor what's happening. That's important, to be able to address this issue, to understand what the scope of the issue is, where the algal blooms are, why they're there. And then finally on some of the mitigation, to actually get in there and help the state and the local communities to be able to address this problem. So there's a $6 billion recreational and commercial fishing industry in the Great Lakes. Lake Erie is the most productive of all the Great Lakes. It's also the shallowest. It's the one that's most susceptible to these algal blooms. So we got to solve this problem, and I'm hoping the federal government can be a better partner.
It's about the environment, but it's about our fabric of life here, and so much money involved, and then the bottom line comes down to employment for so many people.
Absolutely.
Right?
The biggest source of tourism in Ohio is Lake Erie. It's the biggest single source. Probably about 60% of the dollars in tourism, they say, are spent somewhere along the lake. And some of it's fishing, some of it's just people coming out to enjoy the lake and to go to one of these great communities along the lake. So. And
you're from Cincinnati, so this is it's not like you grew up on Marblehead here,
no,
right?
No, exactly. Although I will tell you, a lot of Cincinnatians do come up to Marblehead.
Sure.
A bunch of them. In fact, I'll be spending the night with one of them tonight, who's right on the lake. It's over near Lakeside somewhere, but this is a gem for Ohio. I mean, and really people from around the country come. When I was fishing last year, there were fishermen there from Tennessee and Kentucky. I actually talked to a guy today who's involved in the business of charter boats and so on, and he said he was in the parking lot yesterday and there were cars from everywhere, not just Ohio. So it's
a great time of the year right now.
Some of the best walleye fishing in the country is right here.
And as this airs, it's probably going to be 90 degrees today. You might have a thunderstorm out there, but that's so it goes.
So it goes.
At this time of the year as well. Why has the concentration for so long been on salt water? Why has it been so difficult to get the federal funding for fresh water?
Yeah, I mean, and one thing we got in this legislation, and again, I was the co-author of it with a guy from Florida, Bill Nelson, and his focus over time has been more on the salt water. And you know, the Gulf of Mexico has these dead zones, and that's been a lot of the focus over the last, I'd say, couple decades about how you deal with the algal blooms in the Gulf, and that's important. But increasingly, we're having this problem show up at freshwaters. The one that I mentioned earlier, the Hoover Reservoir in Columbus, they found an algal bloom there, and they had to spend, you know, a couple $100,000 of taxpayer money to address it. So this is an issue that also affects the taxpayer.
All right. So I believe the last time you were here, we talked about zebra mussels.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and Asian carp, which is
Asian carp,
potential invasive species coming into the lakes.
All of the challenges facing here. So that's one of the issues that you're dealing with this weekend. But of course, the story that has really taken most of the headlines the last month or so has been this this uprising in Iraq, this new crisis in Iraq. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about it. The president asking Congress for $500 million to arm Syrian rebels that will help the incursion in Iraq and the rebels fighting Bashar Assad. So where do you see this going right now as we go forward?
Well, first of all, it's a mess over there, and we need to be careful that we don't make it worse rather than better, because it's chaos. And I think part of the reason it's so chaotic is that we did pull out of Iraq in the way we did. In other words, if we had left a small residual force, including special operators, and left some intelligence on the ground, and left some trainers there to help the Iraqi military, I personally do not believe we'd be in the situation that we're in.
Where are you at with these advisors, these special forces, 300 or so?
Yeah, look,
now.
I think it's necessary to do something. However, I want to see a plan. I mean, I don't know what the strategy is. The strategy was get out as soon as possible, and we did that. And granted, the American people, including me, are tired of war. We all want to, you know, be able to sort of end those wars in the Mideast. But it's a dangerous world out there, and I think the way we ended it should have been keeping, again, a residual force there, a small force, being able to help the Iraqis to defend themselves, not do it for them. And I hope we don't make the same mistake in Afghanistan, because that could, again, become a platform for terrorism. And the reason this matters to us is that this group, ISIS...
And that's what people want to know.
Yeah, the reason it matters to us is this group is like Al-Qaeda, although some say they're worse, you know, because even the Al-Qaeda people think they're too radical, because they are looking for a place where they can establish a platform, not just to, you know, have Sharia law apply and have their, you know, their way of life that they want to apply, but to be able to attack those who disagree with them, including the West, which includes us. And we can't let that happen. And this is where I'm concerned, that we don't have a broader strategy here, a broader plan. Not just America, you know, all the free world should care about this. And in fact, a lot of the Arab countries should care an awful lot about it. The next country that they may approach, we're told, or may try to attack, is Jordan. Well, Jordan's a major ally of the United States. We have a relationship with them, a military relationship. We have a special operations training center there and so on. So this is something that does affect our national security. But I'm not ready to sign off on this additional money until I know there's a broader plan.
All right, a broader plan. Do we know how big ISIS is? You talked about their resolve, their Al-Qaeda, their evil. What type of force are we looking at this group that has taken over so many cities in Iraq so far? What can you tell us?
You know, I've been in briefings, and I won't reveal the classified briefings, because and that's not necessary, because a lot of this has now been in the media. But frankly, it started off as a relatively small group. Some of the numbers I heard, which may or may not be accurate now, we have lousy intelligence because we didn't keep any presence on the ground, but maybe 10,000 fighters to begin with. These are 10,000 terrorists who took over cities and large parts of a country that had, you know, well over 100,000 troops. So, I mean, this is something that could have been handled, is my point, had we had the ability to get the intelligence to respond quickly. And
is it easy to Monday morning quarterback?
Sure. But look, I said at the time we ought to have what was called a status of forces agreement with the Iraqi government, that we ought to leave a small residual force there, including a force of special operators to be able to respond to terrorist threats, and some trainers and some intelligence, so we know what was going on in the country. And frankly, the Iraqi government is asking for all of that now. Well, you know, sort of the horse is out of the barn now, and it's harder. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where we're going to have to, in my view, do something to protect Jordan, to protect some of the Iraqi territory that hasn't been taken yet.
Okay, and then that leads to my next question before we have to take a break. What about protecting Baghdad? Now drones? Armed drones are there, I'm told, and the president has sent some additional Marine contingent to the embassy. And I think it's obviously very important to protect the embassy. If we can't protect it, we should get the people out. The last thing we want to do is leave them there unprotected. But we've got to help the Iraqis solve this problem themselves. We've got to help other countries like Jordan to be able to defend themselves. The Jordanians have asked for some military help so that they can help themselves. I think we ought to do that. All right, Senator Rob Portman. We'll have more with the Senator next week on Conklin and Company. Thanks for coming in this morning. More on the pressing issues as we move forward. We're going to be back on Conklin and Company in just a moment. Stay with us. Back right after this.
Thanks, Lee.